I'm Commander Alyssa Kincaid, 37, and I earned my place the long way, 15 years in uniform, 3 deployments, 0 shortcuts. For years, I covered for family, smoothed crises, and showed up when no one else did. But when my brother-in-law mocked my service at dinner, "She only wears the uniform for attention," I made a call that changed everything. Ever been dismissed or humiliated by someone you've carried on your back? Tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before we dive in, drop where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being wronged, hit like and subscribe for true stories about boundaries and earned respect. What happened next might surprise you. I learned early that respect in the military isn't about the uniform you wear. It's about what you do in it. My name is Commander Alyssa Kincaid, U.S. Navy, 15 years of service, 3 deployments, and more nights away from home than I care to count. I didn't join for glory. I joined because someone in our family had to step up, and that someone was always me. My younger sister Marina married Derek Hellstrom 4 years ago. I was there at the wedding, dress blues and all, standing beside her as she promised forever to a man I barely knew. He seemed decent enough then, polite, ambitious in that vague way people are when they haven't figured out who they are yet. He'd just joined the Army National Guard, weekend warrior stuff, and I thought maybe it would give him direction. Marina was happy, and that was enough for me. The first time I noticed something off was at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. We were all gathered at my parents' house in Virginia, my mother fussing over the turkey, my father quiet in his armchair, Marina setting the table while Derek stood in the kitchen doorway with a beer. I'd just returned from a 6-month deployment in the Persian Gulf, and I was still adjusting to the weight of solid ground beneath my feet. Derek looked at my uniform jacket hanging by the door and said, "Must be nice getting paid to travel the world." I smiled, brushed it off. "It's not exactly a vacation." "Sure," he said, grinning. "But you get per diem, right? Free flights? Sounds like a pretty sweet deal." Marina laughed, light and careless. My mother glanced at me, then away. I didn't respond. I told myself he didn't know better, that he was just making conversation. But the comment stuck with me longer than it should have. Over the next year, the remarks became more frequent. At family barbecues, at birthday dinners, during holidays, Derek had something to say about my service, and none of it was respectful. He joked that my deployments were just extended cruises. He called military benefits government handouts. Once, when I mentioned the funeral of a fellow officer killed in action, he said, "Well, that's the job, right? You signed up for it." I stopped talking about my work around him. It was easier that way. But Derek didn't stop. If anything, he got bolder. He started calling himself a soldier, capitalizing on his guard status, even though he'd never deployed, never seen combat, never spent a night in a forward operating base wondering if mortars would hit before dawn. He wore his uniform to family events, stood a little straighter, talked a little louder. He wanted to be seen as someone who served, but he didn't want to do the serving. What bothered me most wasn't his arrogance, it was the way Marina enabled it. She laughed at his jokes, nodded along when he downplayed my work, never once told him to stop. I wanted to believe she didn't understand what she was doing, that she was just trying to keep the peace. But deep down, I knew better. She'd chosen his side, and I was on my own. I tried to ignore it. I had my own life, my own responsibilities. I was stationed at Naval Station Norfolk, working in Joint Operations Coordination, a job that required precision and clearance, and the kind of trust you don't earn overnight. I had a small apartment near base, a handful of close friends, and a career I was proud of. I didn't need validation from Derek, and I didn't need Marina's approval. Or so I told myself. Then came the dinner. It was a Saturday in late April, warm enough that my mother insisted we eat on the back porch. She'd made pot roast, my father's favorite, and we all sat around the table like we had 100 times before. Derek was in his guard uniform, fresh from drill weekend, and he was in a mood. I could see it in the way he carried himself, the way he talked over everyone, the way he looked at me with something I couldn't quite name. We were halfway through the meal when my father asked me about my new assignment. I'd just been promoted to a joint task force role, coordinating with Army and Air Force units on deployment logistics. It was a significant step up, one I'd worked years to earn. It's good work, I said, keeping it simple. Challenging, but good. Derek leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. So you're basically a secretary now? Pushing papers instead of doing real work. The table went quiet. I set down my fork, looked at him. It's coordination. Making sure people get where they need to go, with what they need to survive. Right, he said, smirking. Sounds real heroic. Marina touched his arm, a gentle warning, but he shrugged her off. Come on, he continued. Let's be honest here. You wear the uniform, sure, but it's not like you're out there doing anything dangerous. You're not infantry. You're not in combat. You just, what? Sit in meetings? Make phone calls. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father stared at his hands. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice level. I've deployed 3 times, Derek. I've been in hostile zones. I've lost people I cared about. What exactly have you done? His smirk widened. I'm doing my part. And I don't need to make a show of it. A show? Yeah. He gestured toward me, casual and cruel. The uniform, the stories, the whole act. You only wear it for attention. That's the only way you get respect. Marina laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but she laughed. My mother looked down. My father said nothing. I didn't explode. I didn't yell. I just nodded slowly, let the words settle, and finished my meal in silence. When dinner ended, I helped clear the table, kissed my mother on the cheek, and drove back to my apartment alone. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off, replaying the moment over and over. The mockery, the laughter, the silence from everyone else. I thought about the years I'd spent serving, the sacrifices I'd made, the friendships I'd lost. I thought about the nights I'd spent in places where the sound of gunfire was so common it became background noise. I thought about the flag-draped coffins I'd saluted, the families I'd stood beside, the weight of responsibility I carried every single day. And I thought about Derek, safe and smug, mocking it all. I realized something then. This wasn't just ignorance. It wasn't just a bad joke. It was contempt. He saw my service as a performance, a costume I wore to impress people. He didn't understand what it meant to serve, and he didn't want to. He wanted the respect without the sacrifice, the title without the work. And Marina had let him. My parents had let him. They'd all let him reduce everything I was to a punchline. I wasn't going to let it happen again. The Monday after the dinner, I went to work like I always did. I put on my uniform, drove to base, checked in at the security gate. Everything felt the same, but something inside me had shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about Derek's words, the casual cruelty of them, the way they'd landed in front of my family without consequence. I had meetings that morning, routine coordination briefings, logistics reviews, the kind of work Derek would have called paperwork. But it wasn't. Every decision I made, every deployment order I reviewed, had weight. It affected real people, real missions, real lives. I knew that. The people I worked with knew that. Derek didn't. Around mid-morning, I ran into Rear Admiral Roland Beckett in the corridor outside the Joint Operations Center. Roland was my mentor, had been since I was a lieutenant. He was the one who'd pushed me toward coordination roles, who'd seen potential in me when I was still trying to prove myself. He was pragmatic, steady, the kind of leader who never raised his voice because he didn't need to. Kincaid, he said, nodding. You look like you've got something on your mind. I hesitated, then shook my head. Just a long weekend, sir. He studied me for a moment, then gestured toward his office. Walk with me. We went inside, and he closed the door. He didn't sit, just stood by the window, arms crossed, waiting. Family trouble, he asked. I didn't know how to answer that. It felt too personal, too small to bring into this space. But Roland had always been good at reading people, and I trusted him. My brother-in-law, I said finally. He's guard. Never deployed. He made some comments at dinner about my service. Called it attention-seeking. Roland didn't react right away. He just nodded slowly, like he'd heard this story before. And your sister? He asked. She laughed. He sighed, rubbed his jaw. That's hard. Family doesn't always understand what we do. Hell, most people don't. But when it's someone wearing the uniform. He trailed off, shook his head. That's different. He wants the respect without earning it, I said. And I helped him get into the guard in the first place. I vouched for him. Roland looked at me sharply. You got him in? I made some calls. Smoothed the process. He wanted to serve, or at least that's what he said. I thought it would be good for him. And now? Now I think he just wanted the title. Roland was quiet for a moment, then he walked over to his desk and pulled up something on his computer. What's his name? Derek Hallstrom. Army National Guard, Virginia. Roland typed, scrolled, clicked. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. He's on the roster for potential deployment, Roland said. Not immediate, but he's in the queue. Standard rotation for guard units heading to support operations overseas. I felt something tighten in my chest. When? Could be 6 months, could be a year. Depends on need and availability. Right now, he's low priority, no special skills, no combat experience, no reason to fast-track him. He said it casually, but I heard what he wasn't saying. No reason to fast-track him unless someone with authority decided otherwise. I didn't respond. I just stood there, processing. Roland watched me carefully. You know you have influence here, Kincaid. Joint Task Force coordination means you're in the loop on deployment assignments. Army, Navy, Air Force, we all work together now. If you wanted to make a recommendation, it would carry weight. I'm not going to abuse my position, I said quickly. I didn't say you would. He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. But you also don't have to go out of your way to protect someone who disrespects what you've sacrificed. If he's in the queue, he's in the queue. That's not your doing. That's just how the system works. I left his office without saying anything else, but his words stayed with me all day. That night, I went home and pulled out Derek's service record. It wasn't hard to access, I had clearance, and his file was part of the larger deployment database I worked with daily. I told myself I was just looking, just checking to see what Roland had mentioned. Derek's record was thin. Basic training, weekend drills, some vehicle maintenance certifications. No deployments, no specialized training, no combat readiness markers. He'd coasted, just like I'd suspected. He'd done the minimum required to keep the uniform and the benefits, but he'd never pushed himself, never volunteered for anything that might challenge him. And yet he'd mocked me for doing exactly that. I closed the file and sat in the dark, thinking. I thought about the first time I deployed. I was 24, barely a year out of the academy, and I was terrified. I didn't admit it to anyone, but I was. I thought about the friendships I'd built overseas, the people I'd relied on, the ones who hadn't made it home. I thought about Lieutenant Sarah Kwan, who died in a vehicle accident during my second deployment. I thought about the funeral, the folded flag, the way her mother had looked at me like I could explain why her daughter was gone. I thought about all the moments Derek would never understand because he'd never lived them. And I thought about how easy it was for him to mock something he'd never had the courage to face. I opened my laptop again, pulled up the deployment coordination interface, and looked at Derek's name in the queue. Roland was right. Derek was on the list. He'd been on the list for months, flagged as available for rotation but never prioritized. The system was designed to be fair, to distribute deployments based on need and capability, but it also allowed for recommendations from coordinating officers, people like me, who understood the operational requirements. All I had to do was move his name up. Just a little. Just enough. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. This wasn't about revenge. I didn't want to hurt Derek. I didn't want to destroy Marina's marriage or create chaos in my family. But I also couldn't keep absorbing the disrespect, couldn't keep pretending his words didn't matter. He'd said I wore the uniform for attention. He'd said I wasn't doing real work. He'd said all of it in front of my family, in front of people who should have defended me, and no one had. Maybe it was time he learned what real work looked like. I closed the laptop without making any changes. Not yet. I needed to be sure. I needed to think this through, to make sure I wasn't acting out of anger or pride or wounded ego. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I knew the decision had already been made. I just hadn't admitted it to myself yet. Derek wanted to be seen as a soldier. He wanted the respect, the recognition, the status. He wanted people to look at him the way they looked at me. Fine. I'd give him the chance to earn it. I didn't make the call right away. I needed time to sit with the decision, to make sure I wasn't acting on impulse. I told myself I was being rational, methodical, but the truth was simpler. I wanted to be certain. Once I set this in motion, there would be no taking it back. I thought about my relationship with Marina. We'd been close once, back when we were kids. I was the older sister, the one who took care of things. When our father lost his job during the recession, I was the one who picked up extra shifts at the grocery store to help with bills. When Marina wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it, I was the one who helped her apply for scholarships, who drove her to campus visits, who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. I enlisted 2 years before she graduated high school. It wasn't a dramatic decision, no big moment of patriotism or destiny. I just needed stability, structure, a way forward that didn't depend on luck or circumstances. The Navy gave me that. It gave me purpose. Marina was proud of me then. She came to my boot camp graduation, cried when I took the oath, told everyone her sister was serving. She looked up to me, or at least I thought she did. When she met Derek, I was cautiously optimistic. He seemed to make her happy, and that mattered more to me than anything else. He was working construction, talking about joining the military, trying to find his footing. Marina asked me to help him navigate the enlistment process, and I did. I made calls, introduced him to recruiters, vouched for his character even though I barely knew him. He joined the Guard 6 months before their wedding. I thought it was a good sign, that he wanted to serve, that he understood the value of commitment. I thought maybe he and I would have something in common, a shared experience that would bring us closer. I was wrong. The Derek I helped enlist wasn't the Derek who showed up at family dinners 2 years later. Somewhere along the way, he decided that wearing the uniform was enough. He didn't need to deploy, didn't need to challenge himself, didn't need to prove anything. He just needed the title, the image, the validation. And when I succeeded where he hadn't, when I got promoted, when I deployed, when I earned the respect he wanted handed to him, he resented me for it. I understood that now. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Derek's mockery wasn't really about me. It was about him. He'd built his identity around being a soldier, but he hadn't done the work to back it up. Every time someone thanked me for my service, every time I wore my uniform in public, every time I talked about my deployments, it reminded him of what he wasn't. And Marina had chosen to stand beside him instead of me. That was the part that hurt most. I wanted to call her, to confront her, to ask why she'd laughed when Derek insulted me. But I didn't. I knew what she'd say. She'd tell me Derek didn't mean it, that I was being too sensitive, that family was supposed to forgive. She'd make excuses for him the way she always did, and I'd be expected to accept it. I was done accepting it. On Wednesday, I had a meeting with Colonel Anika Soren. She was Army, assigned to the Joint Task Force as the administrative officer handling deployment logistics. We'd worked together for over a year, and I respected her. She was sharp, efficient, no nonsense. She didn't waste time on politics or posturing. She just got things done. We were reviewing upcoming rotations, going over the list of personnel flagged for deployment. I saw Derek's name halfway down the second page. Hallstrom, Anika said, tapping the screen. National Guard, Vehicle Maintenance. He's been in the queue for 8 months. No special skills, no urgency. Should we bump him down? I looked at his name, at the notes beside it. Available. No dependents. No medical restrictions. No reason he couldn't go. No, I said. Keep him on the list. Anika glanced at me, curious. You know him? He's my brother-in-law. She raised an eyebrow. And you want him deployed? I want him treated like everyone else, I said. No favors. No special treatment. If his unit needs personnel, he should go. Anika studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. She made a note in the system, and we moved on to the next name. It was that simple. No drama, no grand gesture. Just a decision made in the course of regular business. But I knew what I'd done. That night, I called my old roommate from officer candidate school, Lieutenant Commander Jessica Park. She was stationed in San Diego now, working in personnel management. We hadn't talked in a few months, but we'd stayed close over the years. She was one of the few people I trusted completely. Alyssa, she said when she picked up. It's been forever. How are you? I'm okay, I said. I need to talk something through with you. Oh, that sounds serious. I told her about Derek, about the dinner, about the decision I'd made. I didn't sugarcoat it. I laid it out as plainly as I could, and then I waited for her response. Jessica was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you regret it?" "No. Do you think you will?" I thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe. But I couldn't keep doing nothing." "Then you did the right thing," she said. "Look, I'm not going to tell you how to feel about this. But I will say this. People like Derek, they don't learn unless they're forced to. He's been coasting on your work, on your reputation, on your family's tolerance. And he's been disrespecting you the entire time. If he's going to wear the uniform, he needs to understand what it means." "I just don't want to be the person who uses their position for personal reasons," I said. "You're not," Jessica said firmly. "You didn't invent his deployment orders. You didn't create the need for personnel overseas. You just stopped protecting him from the reality of his own enlistment. That's not revenge. That's accountability." Her words helped, but they didn't erase the doubt. The next day, I went for a run before work, trying to clear my head. I ran along the waterfront near base, watching the ships in the harbor, the sailors moving across the decks, the steady rhythm of military life. It was familiar, grounding. This was my world. This was what I'd chosen. And Derek had chosen it too. He just hadn't realized what that choice meant. By Friday, the paperwork was moving. I didn't touch it directly, I didn't need to. The system was handling it the way it always did, processing requests, matching personnel to needs, issuing orders. Derek's name moved up the list, not because I intervened, but because I didn't intervene to stop it. I went home that night and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat on my balcony, looking out at the lights of the city, and I let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The anger, the hurt, the exhaustion. And then I let it go. This wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries. It was about refusing to tolerate disrespect from someone who'd never earned the right to judge me. Derek would deploy. He'd do the job he'd signed up for. And maybe, just maybe, he'd learn something. If he didn't, that wasn't my problem anymore. The orders came through on Monday. I wasn't there when Derek received them, but I heard about it soon enough. Marina called me that evening, her voice tight and frantic. "Alyssa, did you know about this?" I was at my apartment, making dinner, and I set down the knife I'd been using to chop vegetables. "Know about what?" "Derek got deployment orders. He's leaving in 3 weeks. 3 weeks, Alyssa. He's not ready for this." I leaned against the counter, keeping my voice neutral. "He's been in the Guard for 4 years, Marina. He's as ready as anyone." "No, he's not. He's never deployed before. He's terrified. And I don't understand why this is happening now. He wasn't supposed to go for another year at least." "Things change," I said. "Personnel needs change. The military doesn't work on anyone's personal timeline." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Marina said, quietly, "Did you do this?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted to choose my words carefully, to make sure I said exactly what I meant. "I didn't create his orders," I said finally. "I just stopped protecting him from them." "What does that mean?" "It means Derek has been in the deployment queue for months. He's been eligible this entire time. I could have pulled strings to keep him stateside, to make sure he never had to deploy. But I didn't. I let the system work the way it's supposed to." "You let it work?" Marina's voice rose. "You're in joint operations, Alyssa. You coordinate deployments. You could have done something." "I did do something," I said. "I treated him like everyone else. He's your brother-in-law. And he mocked my service in front of our entire family." The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. "He called me an attention seeker. He said I only wear the uniform for show. He disrespected everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed." "And you laughed, Marina. You sat there and laughed." She didn't respond to that. I could hear her breathing on the other end, fast and shallow. "I'm not doing this out of spite," I continued. "I'm doing this because Derek signed up for the same job I did. If he wants the respect that comes with wearing the uniform, he needs to earn it the same way the rest of us have. That means deploying when he's called. That means doing the work. He's not like you, Marina said, her voice breaking. He's not built for this. Then maybe he shouldn't have enlisted. The silence that followed was heavy, painful. I could hear Marina crying, soft and muffled, and part of me wanted to take it all back, to tell her I'd fix it, to make this easier for her. But I didn't. I'd spent my entire life making things easier for other people, absorbing their problems, carrying their weight. I was done. I have to go, Marina said finally, and she hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the half-prepared meal on the counter. I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt, like I'd finally set down a burden I'd been carrying for years, but wasn't sure I was ready to live without its weight. The next morning, Roland stopped by my office. He knocked once, then stepped inside and closed the door behind him. I heard Hallstrom got his orders, he said. I looked up from my computer. You heard correctly. Roland sat down across from me, his expression unreadable. You want to talk about it? Not particularly. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. But I'll say this, you made the right call. People like him, they need to understand that service isn't a costume. It's a commitment. If he can't handle that, he shouldn't be wearing the uniform. I just didn't want to protect him anymore, I said. I didn't want to use my position to shield him from the reality of what he signed up for. And you shouldn't have to, Roland said. You've earned your place here, Kincaid. You've bled for it. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for expecting the same from others. He left after that, and I went back to work. But his words stayed with me. That evening, my phone rang again. This time it was Derek. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Commander Kincaid, I said, keeping my tone formal. Alyssa, please. His voice was shaking. You have to help me. I can't do this. I'm not ready. You've had 4 years to get ready, Derek. I didn't think I'd actually have to go. He sounded desperate, frantic. I thought it was just, 1 weekend a month. You thought you could wear the uniform without doing the work, I said, cutting him off. You thought you could get the respect without earning it. But that's not how this works. I made a mistake, okay? I shouldn't have said those things at dinner. I was being an idiot. I'm sorry. You're not sorry, I said quietly. You're scared. And that's not the same thing. Please, Alyssa. You can fix this. You have the authority. Just make a call. Pull some strings. I'll do anything. I closed my eyes, took a breath. No. What? I said no. You're going to deploy, Derek. You're going to do the job you signed up for. And maybe, if you survive it, you'll understand why what you said to me mattered. If I survive? His voice broke. Jesus Christ, Alyssa. I could die over there. So could I said. So could any of us. That's the job. That's what you volunteered for. I didn't volunteer for this. Yes, you did. You just didn't think you'd be held accountable for it. He was crying now, and I felt something twist in my chest. I didn't hate Derek. I never had. But I wasn't going to save him from this. I wasn't going to let him escape the consequences of his own choices. Let's see how much attention you get on the front line, I said, echoing his own words back to him. Final order. I hung up before he could respond. I sat alone in my apartment that night, the phone silent on the table beside me. I thought about Derek, panicked and desperate, realizing too late that the uniform he'd worn so proudly came with expectations he wasn't ready to meet. I thought about Marina, caught between loyalty to her husband and whatever remained of her respect for me. I thought about my parents, who would undoubtedly hear about this and say nothing, the way they always did. And I thought about myself, who I'd become, what I'd sacrificed, what I was willing to tolerate. I'd spent years trying to be the good sister, the reliable daughter, the dependable officer. I'd bent over backward to make things easier for everyone around me, to smooth over conflicts, to absorb insults, to carry the weight. But I wasn't that person anymore. I couldn't be. Not if I wanted to keep any part of myself intact. Derek would deploy. He'd face the reality of service, the danger and discomfort and fear that came with it. And maybe he'd grow from it. Maybe he'd come back with a new understanding, a new respect. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd resent me forever, and Marina would never forgive me, and my family would fracture in ways I couldn't repair. Either way, I'd drawn the line. I'd set the boundary. And I wasn't going to cross it, no matter how much guilt or doubt tried to pull me back. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way I hadn't expected. I went to work, completed my assignments, attended meetings, filed reports. Everything felt normal on the surface, but underneath, I could feel the shift, the space that had opened up between me and my family, the weight I'd finally released. Marina stopped calling. My mother sent a few brief text messages asking if I was okay, but she didn't push when I gave short, non-committal responses. My father said nothing at all, which was typical. He'd always been the kind of man who avoided conflict by pretending it didn't exist. Derek's deployment date was set for mid-May. I didn't keep track of the specifics. I didn't need to. The orders had been issued, the paperwork processed, the logistics coordinated. He was in the system now, and the system moved forward with or without my involvement. At work, I found myself more focused than I'd been in months. I threw myself into the job, refining deployment schedules, coordinating with unit commanders, ensuring that every service member heading overseas had what they needed to come home safely. It was the same work I'd always done, but it felt different now. I felt different. Colonel Sora noticed. She pulled me aside one afternoon after a briefing and said, "You've been sharp lately. Sharper than usual. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. "Just trying to stay on top of things." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Well, keep it up. We need more people like you around here." It was a small comment, but it mattered. It reminded me why I joined in the first place, not for recognition or praise, but to be part of something bigger than myself. To contribute. To serve. In mid-April, I ran into an old friend from my second deployment, Commander Malik Torres. He was passing through Norfolk for a conference, and we met for coffee near base. We'd served together in the Gulf, spent long nights talking about everything from family to philosophy to the absurdity of military bureaucracy. He was one of the few people I trusted to tell the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. I told him about Derek. Not the whole story, but enough. I told him about the dinner, the mockery, the decision I'd made. Malik listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Do you think you did it for the right reasons?" "I think so," I said. "But I'm not sure anymore." "Why not?" "Because part of me wonders if I just wanted him to suffer. If I wanted him to feel what I felt, the fear, the uncertainty, the weight of it all. And if that's true, then maybe I'm no better than he is." Malik shook his head. "You're not punishing him, Alyssa. You're holding him accountable. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." He leaned forward, his voice firm. "Punishment is about making someone hurt. Accountability is about making someone face the consequences of their choices. Derek chose to enlist. He chose to wear the uniform. He chose to disrespect your service while benefiting from his own. You didn't create those choices. You just stopped shielding him from them. But what if he's not ready? What if he gets hurt?" "Then he gets hurt," Malik said bluntly. "And that's on him, not you. You can't protect everyone, Alyssa. You can't carry their weight forever. At some point, they have to stand on their own." His words hit harder than I expected. I thought about all the times I'd tried to fix things for Marina, for Derek, for my parents. I'd spent so much of my life trying to make everyone else's burdens lighter, and I'd never stopped to ask if they deserved that effort. "I just don't want to be the kind of person who uses their power to hurt people," I said quietly. "You're not," Malik said. "You're the kind of person who refuses to let someone mock what you've sacrificed. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect." I left the coffee shop feeling steadier, more certain. Malik was right. I hadn't done this out of malice. I'd done it because I refused to be complicit in my own disrespect. A week before Derek's deployment, my mother called. It was late, past 10, and I almost let it go to voicemail. But something made me answer. "Alyssa," she said, her voice soft. "I need to talk to you." "Okay." There was a long pause, and then she said, "Marina is struggling. She's not handling this well. Derek is a mess, and she doesn't know what to do." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. I didn't want Marina to suffer. I just couldn't keep absorbing the cost of her choices. "Is there anything you can do?" my mother asked. "Anything to help?" No, I said. There isn't. Derek has his orders. He's going to deploy. That's how it works. But you could make a call, she pressed. You have connections. You could, I interrupted. But I won't. My mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, why are you doing this? He's family. He disrespected me, I said simply. In front of all of you. And no one said a word. He didn't mean it, Alyssa. You know how Derek is. He talks without thinking sometimes. That's not an excuse, Mom. And the fact that you're making excuses for him right now, that's part of the problem. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to keep this family together. By asking me to compromise myself? By expecting me to fix something I didn't break. She sighed, tired and frustrated. I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. Because I've spent my entire life being the one who bends, I said, my voice steady. I've been the one who sacrifices, who makes things easier for everyone else, who absorbs the insults and the disrespect. And I'm done. Derek made his choice when he enlisted. He made his choice when he mocked my service. Now he has to live with the consequences. He's scared, Alyssa. So was I said quietly. Every single time I deployed. But I went anyway. Because that's what service means. My mother didn't have a response to that. We sat in silence for a while, and then she said, I hope you know what you're doing. So do I said, and I meant it. We hung up, and I sat in the darkness of my apartment, feeling the finality of it all. I'd crossed a line with my family, one I couldn't uncross. They would see me differently now, as cold, as vengeful, as someone who put principle above loyalty. And maybe they were right. Maybe I had changed. But I didn't regret it. The night before Derek's deployment, Marina called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Alyssa, she said, her voice hoarse. I'm not calling to beg. I just need to understand. Understand what? Why you did this. Why you couldn't just let it go. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. Because it wasn't just one comment, Marina. It was years of disrespect. It was Derek minimizing everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed. And it was you, standing beside him, laughing along, never once defending me. I didn't know it hurt you that much, she said softly. You should have, I said. You're my sister. You should have known. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I'm sorry. It was the first time she'd apologized, and it caught me off guard. But it wasn't enough. Words weren't enough. Not anymore. I appreciate that, I said. But it doesn't change anything. Derek is deploying. He's going to do the job he signed up for. And maybe when he comes back, he'll understand why what he said mattered. And if he doesn't come back? Marina's voice cracked. Then I'll live with that, I said. The same way I've lived with losing people I cared about. The same way every service member lives with that risk. It's part of the job. Marina sobbed quietly, and I felt a pang of guilt. But I didn't back down. I couldn't. I love you, Marina, I said. But I can't keep sacrificing myself to protect people who don't respect me. I can't keep being the one who bends while everyone else stays rigid. I had to draw a line somewhere. I know, she whispered. I just wish it hadn't been here. We said goodbye, and I hung up feeling hollow. I'd said what I needed to say, done what I needed to do. But it didn't feel like victory. It just felt like loss. Derek deployed the next day. I didn't see him off. I didn't call to wish him luck. I just went to work, completed my assignments, and came home to my quiet apartment. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on my balcony, looking out at the harbor. The ships were lit up against the dark water, steady and strong. I thought about all the people on those ships, all the people deployed overseas, all the people who'd made the same choice I had to serve, to sacrifice, to carry the weight. And I thought about Derek, somewhere in transit, finally facing the reality of what he'd signed up for. I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. And free. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's burden. I wasn't protecting anyone from consequences they'd earned. I was just standing on my own, holding my own line. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But it was right. And that was enough. Derek had been deployed for 6 weeks when I heard from him again. It wasn't a phone call this time, it was an email, sent at 3 in the morning his time, typed on a military computer from somewhere overseas. The subject line was blank. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity got the better of me. The message was short, awkward, the kind of writing that comes from someone who doesn't know how to say what they mean. Alyssa, I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if I deserve for you to read it. But I'm writing anyway because I need to say something. You were right. About everything. I was arrogant. I was disrespectful. I wanted the credit without doing the work. I thought I could wear the uniform and get respect just for showing up. I didn't understand what it meant. I didn't understand what you've been through. I'm sorry. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. I didn't respond. Not yet. I needed time to process what I was feeling: relief, vindication, something close to forgiveness, but not quite there yet. Work kept me busy. The deployment cycles continued, the logistics flowed, the missions moved forward. I coordinated personnel rotations, reviewed supply chains, attended briefings. It was steady, methodical work, the kind that required precision and attention. It was also work that mattered, work that kept people alive, work that I was good at. Roland stopped by my office one afternoon in late June. He had a folder in his hand, and he set it down on my desk without preamble. Hallstrom's unit submitted a commendation request, he said. Apparently he's been performing well. Took initiative on a vehicle repair that prevented a convoy delay. His commanding officer noticed. I opened the folder, skimmed the report. It was straightforward, factual. Derek had identified a mechanical issue before it became critical, worked through the night to fix it, ensured the mission stayed on schedule. It wasn't heroic, but it was solid. It was the kind of work that mattered. Good for him, I said, closing the folder. Roland studied me. You okay with this? Why wouldn't I be? Because it means he's adapting. It means he's becoming the kind of soldier you wanted him to be. I leaned back in my chair, thought about that. I never wanted him to fail, Roland. I just wanted him to understand. To stop taking for granted what the rest of us have earned. And now? Now he's doing the work. That's all I ever asked for. Roland nodded, took the folder back. For what it's worth, I think you handled this well. You didn't abuse your authority. You just stopped using it to protect someone who didn't deserve protection. That takes integrity. After he left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the deployment schedules on my monitor. I thought about Derek, somewhere overseas, finally understanding what service meant. I thought about Marina, waiting at home, probably terrified every time her phone rang. I thought about my parents, caught in the middle, not knowing how to bridge the gap between their daughters. And I thought about myself, who I'd been before this, who I was now, who I was becoming. I'd changed. I could feel it. I was harder now, less willing to compromise, less willing to absorb other people's disrespect. Some people would call that cold. Some would call it selfish. But I knew what it really was: boundaries. Self-respect. The refusal to be diminished by people who hadn't earned the right to judge me. In early July, Marina called. It was the first time we'd spoken since before Derek's deployment. He wrote to me, she said without preamble. He told me what he wrote to you. He told me he understands now. That's good, I said carefully. Is it? Her voice was strained. Because I'm not sure I do. I'm not sure I understand any of this. Why it had to go this far. Why you couldn't just what, Marina? Just let him keep disrespecting me? Just keep pretending his words didn't matter? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I should have defended you. At dinner. When he said those things. I should have said something. It was the admission I'd been waiting for, the acknowledgement I'd needed. But it didn't feel the way I'd expected. It didn't erase the hurt or undo the damage. It was just words, arriving too late to change what had already happened. Yes, I said simply. You should have. I'm sorry. I know. We sat in silence, the phone line crackling faintly between us. Then Marina said, Do you think we can fix this? Us, I mean. Not Derek. Us. I thought about that. I thought about the years we'd been close, the years I'd protected her, supported her, believed in her. I thought about the trust that had broken, the distance that had grown between us. I don't know, I said honestly. I think we can try. But it's going to take time. And it's going to require you to understand that I'm not the same person I was before. I'm not going to keep absorbing disrespect just to keep the peace. I don't want you to, Marina said. I just want my sister back. I'm still here, I said. I'm just different now. I know, she said softly. I can hear it. We talked for another 20 minutes, carefully, tentatively, like two people learning how to speak the same language again. It wasn't a full reconciliation. There was too much hurt for that, but it was a start. A fragile, uncertain start. When we hung up, I felt something shift. Not closure, exactly, but movement. The weight I'd been carrying hadn't disappeared, but it had lightened. The space between Marina and me was still there, but it felt less like a chasm and more like a distance that could, eventually, be crossed. A week later, I received another email from Derek. This one was longer, more detailed. He described his days, the heat, the monotony, the sudden bursts of urgency when something went wrong. He wrote about the people he worked with, the soldiers who deployed multiple times, the ones who carried the weight with quiet professionalism. He wrote about a conversation he'd had with his sergeant, a veteran of 3 tours, who'd told him that respect wasn't something you claimed, it was something you earned, one mission at a time. I get it now, Derek wrote. I understand what you were trying to teach me. I just wish I hadn't been such an asshole about learning it. I responded this time. Not with forgiveness, not with absolution, but with acknowledgement. Keep doing the work, I wrote. Keep learning. That's all any of us can do. It wasn't much, but it was enough. By August, the worst of the tension had eased. My parents started calling more regularly, asking about work, about life, carefully avoiding anything related to Derek's deployment or the family rift. Marina and I texted occasionally, small exchanges about nothing important, both of us testing the waters, seeing if we could rebuild something from what remained. At work, I continued to excel. I received a commendation for my coordination efforts on a complex multi-service deployment. Roland recommended me for a promotion track that would position me for command roles in the next few years. I accepted, knowing that I'd earned it, knowing that I'd proven myself in ways that had nothing to do with Derek or my family or the decisions I'd made. I'd drawn a line and I'd held it. And in doing so, I discovered something I hadn't expected: strength. Not the kind that comes from endurance or sacrifice, but the kind that comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Derek would return from deployment eventually. We'd have to face each other, have to figure out what kind of relationship, if any, we could build from the wreckage of the old one. Marina and I would continue to navigate the careful balance between sisterhood and self-preservation. My parents would continue to hover at the edges, hoping things would return to normal, not understanding that normal was gone. But I was okay with that. I'd stopped trying to hold everything together, stopped trying to make everyone comfortable, stopped sacrificing myself for the sake of peace. I'd let go. And in letting go, I'd found something I hadn't had in years: freedom. The freedom to be respected. The freedom to set boundaries. The freedom to walk away from people who diminished me, even if they were family. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But it was mine. And that was enough. Derek came home in November. I didn't go to the homecoming, Marina didn't ask me to, and I wouldn't have gone even if she had. Some distances need time before they can be crossed, and we weren't there yet. I heard about his return through my mother, who called the day after he landed stateside. Her voice was careful, measured, like she was testing how I'd react. He's different, she said. Quieter. More serious. Deployment does that, I said. He's been asking about you. Wondering if you'd be willing to talk. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the emails we'd exchanged, the careful words, the acknowledgement of mistakes. I thought about the anger I'd carried for months, the hurt that had driven my decisions. Most of it had faded, replaced by something calmer, more settled. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore, but I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine either. Maybe eventually, I said. But not yet. My mother accepted that without argument, which surprised me. Maybe she was learning too. Maybe we all were. 2 weeks later, I was at the Naval Station Norfolk Commissary when I ran into Derek. I saw him before he saw me. He was in civilian clothes, standing in the produce section with a cart, looking lost in the way people do when they're still adjusting to being home. He'd lost weight, and there was something different in the way he carried himself. Less swagger. More awareness. He looked up, saw me, and froze. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I walked over, keeping my expression neutral. "Derek," I said. "Commander Kincaid." His voice was formal, respectful. I didn't expect to see you here. "I live nearby," I said. "Welcome home." He nodded, shifted his weight. "Thank you." And thank you for he stopped, struggled with the words. "I know what you did. Or didn't do. I know I earned those orders." "You did," I said simply. "I was an asshole," he said. "At that dinner. And before that. I said things I had no right to say. I disrespected you, and I'm sorry." I studied him, looking for insincerity, for the bravado that used to define him. I didn't find it. He just looked tired. And honest. "I appreciate that," I said. "But an apology doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the damage." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for that. I'm just trying to own what I did. To acknowledge it." We stood there in the produce section, surrounded by shoppers and grocery carts and the mundane normalcy of stateside life. It was surreal, having this conversation here, in this place. But maybe that was fitting. Maybe transformation didn't happen in grand moments. Maybe it happened in small ones, in grocery stores and quiet admissions. "You did good work over there," I said. "I saw the commendation. Your CO said you stepped up." Derek looked surprised. "You saw that?" "I see everything that crosses my desk. That's the job." He nodded slowly. "I learned a lot. About what service really means. About what you've been doing all these years. I had no idea." "Most people don't," I said. "That's why the mockery hurt. Because it came from someone who should have known better." "I do now," he said. "Know better, I mean." I believed him. Not because I wanted to, but because I could see it in him, the change, the understanding, the hard-won humility that comes from being tested and barely surviving it. "Good," I said. "Then maybe something worthwhile came out of all this." We talked for a few more minutes, carefully, like two people negotiating a truce. He told me about his deployment, about the heat and the fear and the moments when he thought he wouldn't make it. He told me about the soldiers he'd served with, the ones who'd been doing this for years, who made it look easy even though it never was. He told me he understood now why I'd done what I did. "I needed to face it," he said. "I needed to stop hiding behind the uniform and actually earn it. You gave me that chance. Even if it didn't feel like a gift at the time." "It wasn't meant to be a gift," I said. "It was meant to be accountability." "I know," he said. "And I'm grateful for it. Even though I hated you for it at first." I almost smiled at that. I figured. When we parted ways, there was no hug, no dramatic reconciliation. Just a nod, a mutual acknowledgement that we'd both changed, that the people we'd been before this were gone, replaced by something harder and more honest. I didn't know if Derek and I would ever be close. I didn't know if I could fully forgive him, or if he could fully forgive me for sending him into the fire. But I knew we'd reached an understanding, a respect built on something real instead of something assumed. And that was enough. Marina and I met for coffee in mid-December. It was her idea, and I almost said no. But something told me it was time. We met at a small cafe near the waterfront, away from family, away from the weight of our parents' expectations. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a mug. I sat down across from her, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "I don't know how to start this," Marina said finally. "Then don't," I said. "Just talk." She took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About what I did. Or didn't do. And I realized something. I spent so much time trying to keep Derek happy, trying to make sure he felt supported, that I forgot to do the same for you. And you're my sister. You've always been there for me. And when you needed me to be there for you, I wasn't." I didn't respond right away. I let her words sit, let myself feel them. "You're right," I said. "You weren't there." And that hurt more than anything Derek said. "I know," Marina said, her voice breaking. "And I'm so sorry, Alyssa. I'm so sorry. I watched her cry, and I felt something soften inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something close to it. A willingness to try. I can't go back to the way things were, I said. I can't be the person who absorbs everything, who makes everything okay for everyone else. I can't do that anymore. I don't want you to, Marina said. I just want us to be honest with each other. To actually show up for each other. Can we do that? I thought about it. I thought about the years of sisterhood, the bond we'd built, the trust we'd broken. I thought about whether it was possible to rebuild something from the pieces that remained. We can try, I said finally. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It wasn't a promise that everything would be perfect. But it was a start. And sometimes a start is enough. We talked for over an hour, carefully rebuilding the bridge between us. Marina told me about the months Derek had been gone, about the fear she'd lived with, about the realization that she'd taken my strength for granted. I told her about the weight I'd been carrying, about the decision I'd made, about the freedom I'd found in finally setting boundaries. By the time we left the cafe, something had shifted. We weren't back to where we'd been, but we were moving forward. Together. The holidays came and went. I spent Christmas with my family, and for the first time in months, the tension was manageable. Derek was there, quieter than before, more respectful. He didn't make jokes about my service. He didn't mock anyone's sacrifices. He just existed alongside us, still finding his place in this new dynamic. My father shook my hand, told me he was proud of me. My mother hugged me tight, whispered that she was glad I was there. Marina sat beside me at dinner, and we talked about small things, work, weather, plans for the new year. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, still gaps in the conversation where the hurt lingered. But it was real. And real was better than the facade we'd been maintaining before. As I drove home that night, I thought about everything that had happened, the mockery, the decision, the deployment, the slow and painful process of rebuilding. I thought about the person I'd been a year ago, the person who absorbed insults and carried other people's weight. I thought about the person I was now, the person who'd learned to set boundaries, to demand respect, to walk away from people who diminished her. I'd lost something in this process, the easy comfort of blind family loyalty, the illusion that love meant accepting everything. But I'd gained something too, self-respect. The knowledge that I wouldn't tolerate mockery of what I'd sacrificed. The strength to hold my ground, even when it cost me. Derek had deployed. He'd faced the reality of service. He'd come home changed. And maybe, in the end, that was what I'd wanted all along, not revenge, not punishment, but accountability. The understanding that respect isn't given freely. It's earned, one difficult choice at a time. And I'd earned mine. Spring arrived with the kind of quiet that follows storms. The tensions that had defined the previous year had settled into something manageable, not resolved entirely, but no longer raw. I'd learned to exist in this new normal, this version of my family that was more honest and harder, built on truth instead of comfortable lies. Work remained my anchor. I was promoted to a senior coordination role in late February, a position that carried more responsibility and more influence. I coordinated multi-service deployments across 3 theaters, managed personnel logistics for thousands of service members, and sat in meetings where my voice actually mattered. I'd earned this through years of work, through competence and dedication, through the kind of steady professionalism that couldn't be mocked or dismissed. Roland stopped by my office on the day my promotion was announced. He didn't say much, just congratulated me, told me I'd earned it, and reminded me that the best leaders were the ones who understood what sacrifice really meant. I knew he was talking about more than just my military service. He was talking about the choices I'd made, the boundaries I'd set, the price I'd paid for demanding respect. "You did the right thing," he said before he left. "Don't ever doubt that." I didn't. In March, Derek reached out again. This time it wasn't an email, it was a request to meet in person. Marina had asked me first, feeling out whether I'd be open to it, and I'd said yes. Not because I'd forgiven him completely, but because I'd moved past the anger. I was curious to see who he'd become, whether the change I'd seen in the grocery store was real or just a temporary effect of readjustment. We met at a diner halfway between Norfolk and where he and Marina lived. Neutral ground. I arrived first, ordered coffee, and waited. Derek walked in 10 minutes later. He looked better than he had in November, more settled, more like someone who'd found his footing again. He slid into the booth across from me, ordered his own coffee, and then just sat there for a moment, collecting his thoughts. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "You asked," I said simply. He nodded, wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. "I've been thinking about what to say to you for months. I've written it out, practiced it, tried to figure out how to explain what I've learned. But I think the simplest version is this: I was wrong. About everything. About you, about service, about what it means to wear the uniform." "I know," I said. "You've said that before." "I know I have. But I want you to understand that I mean it. Not just as an apology, but as a statement of fact. I was arrogant. I thought I could claim respect without earning it. I thought your deployments were something to minimize, something that didn't really matter because they weren't combat. I didn't understand that there are 100 different ways to serve, 100 different kinds of sacrifice." I sipped my coffee, let him continue. "When I was over there," Derek said, "I met this guy. Sergeant First Class, 3 tours, Bronze Star. He was in logistics, same as you. And I made some comment one day about how at least we weren't infantry, at least we weren't in the real danger. And he looked at me like I was the dumbest person he'd ever met." Derek smiled slightly at the memory. He told me that logistics is what keeps everyone alive. That every meal, every bullet, every piece of equipment that makes it to the front line, that's because of people like him. Like you. He said the reason infantry can do their job is because people like us do ours. And if we fail, people die. That's the weight we carry. And I'd never thought of it that way. "Most people don't," I said. "I should have," Derek said. "Especially after you vouched for me, after you helped me get into the Guard. I should have respected what you did instead of resenting it." "Why did you resent it?" I asked. It was a question I'd wondered about for months, one I'd never asked directly. Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because you made it look easy. You were successful, respected, confident. And I was struggling. Struggling to figure out who I was, what I was good at. And it was easier to tear you down than to build myself up. It was easier to mock your service than to acknowledge that mine didn't measure up." It was the most honest thing he'd said, and I respected him for it. "That's not my fault," I said. "No," Derek agreed. "It's not. It's mine. I could have asked for your help. I could have learned from you. Instead, I tried to diminish you. And that was cowardly." We sat in silence for a while, both of us processing. Then Derek said, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm different now. That deployment, it changed me. It showed me what I was missing. And I'm grateful for that, even though I hated you for making it happen." "I didn't make it happen," I said. "I just stopped preventing it." "I know," Derek said. "And that's the part that really got to me. You could have protected me. You had the power to keep me stateside, to make sure I never had to face any of this. But you didn't. You let me experience what I'd signed up for. And as much as I resented it at the time, I understand now that it was the best thing you could have done for me." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent months justifying my decision, defending it to myself and others, carrying the weight of wondering if I'd done the right thing. And here was Derek, telling me that I had. That it had mattered. "You're welcome," I said finally. Derek nodded, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. He slid it across the table toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." I opened the box. Inside was a unit coin, the kind that gets passed between service members as a token of respect, of shared experience. This one was from Derek's deployment, marked with his unit's insignia and the dates of his tour. "I want you to have this," Derek said. "Not as an apology. As a thank you. For teaching me what I needed to learn." I picked up the coin, felt the weight of it in my hand. It was a small thing, a piece of metal, but it meant something. It meant acknowledgement. It meant respect. "Thank you," I said. We finished our coffee and talked for another hour. Not about the past, not about the hurt or the anger or the choices we'd made. We talked about the future, about Derek's plans to pursue training as a heavy equipment operator, about my promotion, about Marina and how she was doing. We talked like two people who'd survived something difficult and come out the other side different but intact. When we parted ways, Derek shook my hand. It was formal, respectful, the gesture of one service member to another. And for the first time since the dinner that had started all of this, I felt like we were equals. In April, Marina and I went for a walk along the waterfront. It had become a regular thing. Once a month, we'd meet and walk and talk, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. We talked about everything and nothing, finding our way back to each other slowly. Derek told me about your coffee, Marina said as we walked. He said it went well. It did, I said. He's changed. He has, Marina agreed. He's the person I thought I was marrying. The person he could have been all along if he'd just been willing to do the work. Are you okay? I asked. With everything that happened? Marina thought about that. I am now. I wasn't for a long time. I was angry at you, angry at him, angry at myself. But I've come to understand that what you did, it wasn't cruel. It was necessary. Derek needed to face reality. And I needed to stop enabling him. I'm sorry it had to happen the way it did, I said. I'm not, Marina said. Not anymore. Because if it hadn't, we'd still be where we were, Derek mocking your service, me laughing along, you absorbing all of it. That wasn't sustainable. Something had to break. I just wish it hadn't been us, I said. We're not broken, Marina said firmly. We're just different. And maybe that's better. I thought about that as we walked. She was right. We were different now, all of us. Derek had learned what it meant to serve. Marina had learned what it meant to stand up for the people she loved. And I had learned what it meant to demand respect, to set boundaries, to refuse to be diminished. We'd all paid a price for those lessons. But we'd all grown from them too. As spring turned to summer, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. Work was challenging but fulfilling. My relationship with my family was honest instead of comfortable. I had friends, colleagues, a life that felt authentically mine instead of one built around other people's expectations. I still carried the coin Derek had given me. I kept it on my desk at work, reminder of what had happened, of what I'd learned. Some people might have seen it as a trophy, proof that I'd won some battle against my brother-in-law. But I didn't see it that way. I saw it as evidence that accountability matters, that respect has to be earned, that sometimes the hardest thing you can do for someone is refuse to protect them from their own choices. Derek continued to serve in the Guard. He'd re-enlisted, committed to another term, and he was taking it seriously now. He'd signed up for additional training, volunteered for more responsibilities, stopped treating his service like a part-time hobby. He called me once to ask for advice on a deployment logistics question, and I helped him without hesitation. We weren't close, but we were cordial, respectful. Marina and I grew closer again, but in a different way. We weren't the sisters we'd been before. That version of us was gone, replaced by something more careful, more honest. We knew each other's boundaries now. We understood that love didn't mean accepting everything, that family didn't mean tolerating disrespect. And that knowledge made our relationship stronger, even if it made it more complicated. My parents never fully acknowledged what had happened. They were relieved that the tension had eased, that family gatherings were less fraught, but they didn't understand the why behind it. They still saw me as the difficult one, the one who'd caused problems instead of smoothing them over. And I'd made peace with that. I didn't need their understanding. I just needed them to respect my choices. In late June, I attended a change of command ceremony at Norfolk. One of my colleagues was taking over a new position, and the base was full of officers in their dress uniforms. Families gathered to celebrate, the formal pageantry of military tradition on full display. As I stood there watching the ceremony, I thought about how far I'd come. Not just in my career, but as a person. I thought about the young officer I'd been when I first enlisted, eager, uncertain, desperate to prove herself. I thought about the years I'd spent absorbing other people's expectations, trying to be everything for everyone, sacrificing my own needs for the sake of peace. And I thought about who I was now, someone who'd learned to set boundaries, to demand respect, to walk away from people who diminished her. Someone who understood that true strength wasn't about endurance or sacrifice. It was about knowing your own worth and refusing to compromise it. The ceremony ended, and people began to disperse. I stayed for a moment longer, watching the colors being retired, listening to the final notes of the national anthem echoing across the base. This was my world. This was what I'd chosen, what I'd fought for, what I'd earned. And I'd be damned if I let anyone reduce it to a punchline ever again. I walked back to my car, feeling the weight of my uniform, the coin in my pocket, the years of service that had shaped me. I thought about Derek, somewhere out there, finally understanding what this all meant. I thought about Marina, learning to balance loyalty with honesty. I thought about my family, slowly adjusting to the new boundaries I'd drawn. And I thought about myself, not with pride or vindication, but with something quieter. Acceptance. Peace. I'd done what I needed to do. I'd held the line. And in doing so, I discovered that sometimes the greatest act of service isn't sacrifice. It's refusing to be sacrificed. I drove home as the sun set over the harbor, the sky painted in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow, I go back to work, back to the meetings and deployments and logistics that kept everything running. I'd continue building my career, strengthening my relationships, living my life on my own terms. But tonight, I just drove. Windows down, music playing softly, the warm air washing over me. Free from the weight I'd carried for so long. Free from the need to make everyone else comfortable. Free to be exactly who I was, without apology or explanation. The family dinner felt like a lifetime ago now. Derek's mockery, the laughter, the silence that had followed. It had been the catalyst, the moment that forced everything to the surface. But it wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of a new one. A story where respect mattered. Where boundaries held. Where accountability meant something. A story where I was no longer the supporting character in everyone else's narrative, but the author of my own. And that story was just getting started. Thanks for sticking with me. If this hit home, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder. Quick questions. What would you have done at that dinner? Speak up, walk out, or wait? Was moving him up in the queue accountability or overreach? Have you ever stopped protecting someone who kept disrespecting you? How did it change things? If you were my sister, what should you have said in that moment? Drop your thoughts below. I'm reading every comment.